The text message arrived on a Tuesday at 7:43 in the evening. I was sitting in front of the TV, which was turned off. I do not even remember how long I had been sitting there when I heard the sound of the phone. I thought it was just a random notification, one of those sounds that filled the silence with nothing. But when I saw the name on the screen, I felt my heart skip a beat. Daniel, my son. After 8 months of absolute silence, Dad let us have dinner on Friday. Just the two of us. I miss you. I read that sentence over and over again, trying to believe it was real. My hands were shaking. I did not know whether to cry or laugh. It had been so long since I heard from him that I had stopped expecting anything like this. For months, loneliness had become my only routine. And now, in a few words, a door opened that I thought was closed forever. I left the phone on the table. I walked to the hallway mirror and looked at myself carefully. The reflection staring back was not the man I used to be. Gray hair, tired eyes, a shirt that hung too loosely on my shoulders. I wondered if Daniel would recognize me, if he would remember who I was before I became the man he decided to forget. The following days felt eternal. Friday seemed like it would never come. I cleaned the house. I shaved my beard. I polished my old shoes and ironed the only decent shirt I had left. Every small gesture was a way to contain the anxiety and fear. It was not just the time that had passed since the last time we saw each other. It was the way he wrote it. To correct, to measured. Daniel was never one to write, "I miss you," but I clung to that illusion. Sometimes you need to lie to yourself a little to keep breathing. On Friday at 4 to 8, I was in front of his house, that same house where I had spent so many afternoons playing with my granddaughter until his wife, my daughter-in-law Rachel, asked for some space. And Daniel, as always, chose his comfort over his father. The neighborhood was the same. Quiet streets, warm lights in the windows, the smell of fresh bread coming from the bakery on the corner. Only now, seeing that white facade with the flower pots at the entrance, I felt that something did not fit. The lights inside were off, except for one flickering in the dining room. The gate was ajar. Daniel's car was parked. I took a deep breath, adjusted my scarf, and walked up the stone steps. When I raised my hand to ring the doorbell, the door opened slowly, and from the darkness came the trembling voice of Martha, the housekeeper. "Mr. Robert, do not come in. Go away. Please get out of here as soon as possible." Her words froze my blood. "What are you saying, Martha? Where is my son? I cannot explain it. Just go away. Do not ask me anything." I saw the terror in her eyes. It was not nervousness. It was not confusion. It was pure fear. Something inside me tightened. I took a step back and lowered my voice. "Please, sir, trust me. Do not come in." My heart was pounding hard. "Is something wrong with Daniel?" I insisted. She shook her head, looking inside. "No, not with him, with you." The door slammed shut, and I stood there in the middle of the porch, with the sound of my breathing ringing in my ears. I do not remember walking down the steps. I only know that I ran to the car as if the air weighed heavy in my lungs. I sat down, locked the doors, and started the engine, but I did not move. Fear mixed with disbelief. What was happening from the driver's seat? I had a direct view of the dining room windows. I waited. 3 minutes passed. Nothing. And then, suddenly, the house lit up. One by one, the interior lights turned on as if someone had been waiting for my departure. 2 men appeared whom I did not recognize. They were carrying briefcases and envelopes. Daniel followed them with a serious expression, talking on the phone. Behind him, Rachel, dressed in black, was reviewing some papers in a hurry. Something did not fit. It was not a family dinner. It was a meeting, a carefully planned one. As I watched, Martha appeared for a second at the window. Her eyes met mine. She shook her head gently in a gesture that said more than 1,000 words. "Do not do it." I turned on the car, but I did not drive away. I just watched. 5 minutes later, Daniel approached the large window. He took something out of his pocket, a document, and as he signed it, he smiled. A smile I did not remember ever seeing on him. In that moment, I felt a knot in my stomach. It was not sadness. It was a mixture of fear and betrayal. My son, the same one who once hugged me with tears in his eyes when his mother died, the same one who swore, "I will always take care of you, Dad." Now, he was there inside my old house, signing something that by instinct I knew had my name written on it. The reflection of the lights, mixed with my breath fogging up the car window, What is happening is more serious than you can handle. But then I saw it. Daniel handed an envelope to Rachel. She put it in her purse, and unexpectedly both looked up toward the window, toward where I was. I ducked instinctively. My heart was pounding in my chest. I waited a few seconds, and when I looked again, the curtain was closed. Something told me I should not leave. That night was not over yet, that if I left, I would take with me a doubt that I could never forget. But before continuing, I would like to know if you subscribe to the channel and if you like the video. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. Now, let us continue, because what I discovered that night from my car changed my life forever. The sound of the running engine accompanied me all night. I did not have the courage to go back home. I stayed there, parked in front of my son's house, watching the lights go out one by one, until only one remained on the study. Inside, Daniel walked from one side to the other, talking on the phone. I saw him gesturing with that impatience he inherited from me, but without the tenderness his mother used to put in every gesture. Suddenly, he threw something on the desk, ran his hand through his hair, and stared into nothingness. For an instant, I wanted to believe that in that silence there was room for regret, but it was too late for naive hopes. As I watched him, memories began to pound on the door of my memory, one after another, without permission. It was almost 3 years ago in that same house, during an argument that started for a reason so small that now it seems ridiculous. The sale of the old family property. After the death of my wife Elizabeth, I was left alone with that huge house. Daniel insisted I sell it. He said it made no sense to keep it, that it would be more comfortable for me to move close to them, but I could not. Every corner held something of her, her scent, her voice, her laughter when she cooked clumsily. Selling it would have been like burying her a second time. Daniel told me that day, with an impatient tone, "It makes no sense to keep paying taxes for an empty house." "It is not empty," I replied. "Your mother is here. Your mother is gone, Dad. That is what you believe." Rachel, his wife, intervened with that cold voice she always used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "It is not healthy to live in the past, Mr. Robert, and it is not healthy to live without Ruth's daughter," I answered her. She stood up, annoyed, and got straight to the point. "Daniel is right. If we sell, we can invest that money. It is not about erasing memories, but about taking advantage of opportunities." "We can?" I asked, looking at her. "Or is it about you being able to?" Daniel hit the table. "Enough, Dad. Do not attack her." "I am not attacking her," I told him. "I am only defending the little I have left." It was then that I heard him say what still burns my soul. "If you prefer to live among ghosts, do it, but do not expect me to join you." That was the last sentence we exchanged before the silence that separated us for months. Then came the distance, the unanswered messages, the forgotten birthdays, until this invitation appeared like a flame lit in the dark. At midnight, when the lights in his house finally went out, I lit a cigarette, even though I had stopped smoking years ago. The smoke scraped my throat, but the fire gave me a strange clarity. Something inside me told me that dinner was not a reunion, but a carefully prepared trap. But why? What could my own son gain by hurting me? And then I remembered Martha, her terrified look, her voice whispering, "Not with him, with you." That phrase repeated in my head over and over again. Something was happening, something bigger than me, and it was not a fruit of my imagination. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I decided to leave. The neighborhood slept, and only the distant sound of a dog broke the silence. I drove aimlessly for a good while, until exhaustion forced me to stop in front of a gas station. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window watching the neon reflection on the windshield. A young employee about 20 years old approached and asked me if I needed anything else. I shook my head. "Are you okay, sir?" he insisted. I did not know what to answer him, how to explain that I had just discovered that blood can also become an enemy. I only said, "I am tired, son, tired of not understanding why love wears out so fast." The boy looked at me for a second and then walked away in silence. His simple gesture reminded me of something. Not all youth is lost. I returned home shortly before dawn. The clock struck 5 when I walked through the door. The air smelled of dampness and dust, of long loneliness. I turned on the desk lamp and let myself fall into the chair. On the table was still the photograph I have kept for years. Daniel, barely 8, sitting on my shoulders at the beach. We were both smiling. I thought nothing could break that bond. I took the photo in my hands and looked at it for minutes. The sadness was not rage. Maybe I did not know how to love him well. Maybe I demanded he'd be strong too soon. Maybe I confused discipline with hardness and affection with control. Parents also make mistakes. Only sometimes we discover it when no one wants to listen anymore. Suddenly, the phone ringing pulled me out of my thoughts. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello, Mr. Robert. It is Martha." My body tensed. "Martha, what is wrong?" "I cannot talk much. I just wanted to make sure you left that place." "Yes, I left. Thank God. What is happening?" She hesitated for a few seconds. "I cannot tell you over the phone, but you have to see me. It is important. Where?" "Tomorrow at noon, at the cafeteria in the old station." The line went dead. I remained motionless, holding the receiver as if it weighed a ton. The shadows of the past mixed with those of the present, forming a labyrinth from which I did not know if I wanted to exit. I knew I had to sleep, but sleep did not come. Only the image of my son in that window, signing something I did not understand, and the echo of a female voice that for the first time in a long time did not bring me comfort, but a warning. And although my heart wanted to believe in Daniel's innocence, my fatherly instinct told me that the truth, when revealed, was not going to save me. It was going to destroy everything. The old station was almost empty. The clock hanging high above marked 12 o'clock sharp, but seemed stopped in another century. The air smelled of reheated coffee and dust. I sat by the window where the midday light barely managed to pass through the foggy glass. I ordered a black coffee and waited. I did not know if Martha would come. I did not know if I should be there. But when a person looks at you with so much fear and asks you to escape, you cannot ignore it. And even less when that fear comes from someone who has been in your son's house. 10 minutes passed, then 15. My coffee had already gone cold when I saw her enter. She wore a dark coat and sunglasses that barely disguised her nervousness. She looked around several times before approaching. "Mr. Robert," she whispered, "thank you for coming." She sat in front of me without taking off her coat. Her hands were shaking so much that she spilled a little coffee when taking the cup. "Relax, Martha. No one is watching us." She shook her head. "You do not understand. If they see me with you, I lose my job. And, oh, worse." That last word hit me harder than any other. Worse. "Tell me the truth, Martha." I tried to sound firm, although my heart was pounding hard. "What is happening with Daniel?" "It is not with him. It is with all of them." "What do you mean all of them?" "Your son, his wife, and that lawyer who went to the house last night." I leaned forward. "Explain yourself." She took a deep breath, as if she needed to gather courage. "For weeks, something strange has been happening in that house. Envelopes arrive, strange calls. Mrs. Rachel forbade me to enter the study, and yesterday she stopped. Yesterday, I heard a conversation I should not have heard." "What kind of conversation?" "One about you, sir." My heart skipped a beat. "About me?" Martha nodded. "They said everything had to look like an accident, that after Friday, no one would suspect." My blood froze. "An accident? What do you mean? That they wanted to invite you to dinner too?" She lowered her voice. "To hurt you." The silence between us was so dense, I could hear the ticking of the station clock. I brought my hands to my face. I did not want to believe it. My own son, my blood. "No," I murmured. "There must be a misunderstanding." Martha looked at me with a mixture of compassion and fear. "But I heard your daughter-in-law say that they could not leave loose ends. If that old man does not sign the papers, we will have to fix it another way," she said. My fingers trembled. "What papers?" She opened her purse and took out a folded envelope. "I found this in the kitchen. It was in a folder with your name." She handed it to me with trembling hands. Inside were copies of notarized documents. The header said, "Transfer of asset rights, Robert Miller." The signatures at the bottom were mine, or at least they appeared to be. "But I never signed this," I whispered. "I know." Martha nodded. "That is why I told you to leave. If you had entered that night, you would not be here talking to me." I felt dizzy. The world spun for a second, and I had to grab the table not to fall. I stared at the papers, incredulous. I could not understand at how they had come to that. "Who is that lawyer?" I asked. "A certain Richard Stone. He has been going to the house for months. Your son says he is his financial advisor, but actually he is helping your wife transfer everything to another account." "In whose name?" "Hers." In a company that does not exist, I stayed silent. In my head, the pieces started to fit. The months of silence, the calls he never answered, the forced tone of the invitation. It was not a reconciliation. It was an ambush. Martha leaned toward me. "You cannot go back to your house, sir. You cannot sign anything or talk to them." And what should I do? Find someone you trust and disappear for a few days. Disappear. The words spun in my mind. It was absurd. Run away at my 60 years. Hide like a criminal to survive my own family. That fear in her eyes was real. And my son, the same boy who one day told me, "I want to be like you, Dad," had ceased to exist. We left the cafeteria together. The sun was already setting. Dye in the cobblestones, an amber tone. Martha walked fast, looking sideways. Before saying goodbye, she squeezed my hand. "Do not trust anyone, sir, not even your son." I watched her walk away through the people until she was lost in the crowd. I stood there feeling that something inside me had broken. It was not just trust or security. It was my own identity as a father. I started the car and drove aimlessly. Martha's words echoed in my head. "After Friday, no one would suspect." That phrase haunted me. If I had not obeyed her warning, maybe I would already be dead. I arrived home late at night. I turned on the living room light and opened the documents once more. It was perfect, identical to mine. The stroke, the slant, even the pressure of the pen. I stood observing the paper, trying to understand at what moment I stopped knowing my own son. Suddenly, something shook me. At the bottom of the contract, in small letters, there was a date. Saturday, July 9th, the day after the dinner. That was the date they planned to present my session before a notary. They had it all planned. My death, my signature, my disappearance. I stood up slowly and looked at myself in the mirror. The eyes staring back were those of a man who could no longer continue being a victim. A father can forgive a word, an offense, a distance, but not a planned betrayal. That night, I understood something. I could not report them yet. I could not act without proof. And most importantly, I could not let them know I was alive. Because if they wanted to see me dead, they would have to face the version of me they themselves created. A man without fear. A father who had lost everything and now had nothing to lose. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the scene over and over again. My son, his wife, the documents, the lawyer, and my name forged at the bottom of a contract that sealed my demise. My mind burned, but my heart, on the other hand, was frozen. For years, I believed myself a strong man capable of facing everything. But the betrayal of a son has a different weight. You do not carry it on your back, but in your soul. It is a type of pain that is not screamed or cried. It is thought. And that night, I thought too much. At 5 in the morning, I got up, made coffee, and sat at the table with the documents in front of me. I needed clarity, and the only way to get it was by transforming my pain into something useful. I knew that if I went to the police, they would tell me it was a suspicion without proof, and if I confronted Daniel, I would only accelerate the inevitable. So I decided to do what I never thought I would do: play their game. I took out a notebook, opened a new page, and wrote a word at the top: plan. Below, I traced 3 columns: people, times, risk. I felt absurd, like a criminal designing a crime. But then I remembered Martha's words: do not trust anyone. And I understood that my only defense would be my own cunning. The first step was finding someone trustworthy, and there were not many left. It was then that I thought of Jack, an old friend from my youth. We had worked together decades ago at the engineering firm where I met Elizabeth, my late wife. Jack was always a discreet man, loyal, with a sharp mind for legal details. After retiring, he retreated to a small house in the country, a few miles from the city. I called him mid-morning. He took a wild answer. Robert, his voice sounded raspy, surprised. Damn, I thought you were in another country. I wish I were Jack, I replied with bitterness. I need to see you. Is it that serious? Let us say it is a matter of life or death. There was silence on the other end. Come this afternoon. Do not tell anyone. The drive to his house was long and silent. The road wound through dry fields and trees twisted by the wind. While I drove, I mentally reviewed every word Martha had told me. Every detail could be a clue, every memory, a warning. When I arrived, Jack was waiting for me on the porch with his eternal hat and his cup of coffee. As soon as he saw me, he hugged me. "You have the same smell of coffee and sadness as always," he joked. I smiled for the first time in days. "And you still smell like dirt and advice that hurts." We sat in front of the fireplace. I told him everything, omitting nothing. My son's message, Martha's warning, the forged documents. Jack listened without interrupting, slowly moving the cup in his hands. When I finished, he remained silent for a few seconds. "So, they want to kill you," he said finally, with a chilling calm. "It seems so. And what do you plan to do? Survive?" He leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms. "I need your help. You know you have it." I showed him the papers. Jack read them with attention and nodded. "This is a professional forgery." "Can you trace where it came from?" "With time, yes, but first we must protect you." "Protect me? How?" "By disappearing. What? If they think you are already out of the game, they will lower their guard. It is the only way to catch a snake. Let it believe it is bitten." I stared at him. The idea was as absurd as it was brilliant. "And how am I supposed to disappear?" I asked. Jack smiled with that malice only old foxes have. "Leave it to me. I have contacts at the local funeral home." "Yeah? You think tomorrow we can organize a little domestic accident? Are you talking about faking my death?" "Exactly." The idea churned my stomach, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. If Daniel and Rachel planned to keep my assets, they would see my supposed death as a perfect opportunity. And while they sank into their own lie, I could observe them from the darkness. That night, I stayed to sleep at Jack's house. He prepared a simple room with a wooden bed and a thick blanket. Before lying down, I took out my wife's photo and put it on the table. "Elizabeth," I whispered, "I never wanted it to end like this, but I can no longer be the father who waits. Now I have to be the man who acts." I turned off the lamp and looked at the ceiling. The silence of the country was absolute. For the first time in weeks, I did not feel fear, but a strange sense of control. It was as if life had given me back the helm after a long shipwreck. At dawn, Jack entered with a thermos of coffee and an envelope in his hand. "Here is everything you will need," he said, leaving it on the table. Inside was a new ID, a notebook with fake notes and a key. "What is this? A cabin I have on the outskirts near the river. No one will find you there." "And afterwards?" I asked. "Afterwards, we let them talk. Sin move. And when they think everything is under control, you will return to take revenge." "No, Robert, to show them who you are." I stared at the fire crackling in the fireplace. The flames danced as if they knew something was about to begin. And in that instant, I decided. The neighbor's alarm called the fire department. When the media arrived, there was already talk of a tragedy at the home of retired businessman Robert Miller. From Jack's cabin several miles away, I watched the live broadcast. Smoke was still coming out of the roof of what was once my home. A reporter spoke in front of the cameras with a serious and theatrical tone. "Sources close indicate that Mr. Miller lived alone. An accident is presumed. Authorities are still investigating the cause of the fire." I stayed silent. I did not know whether to cry for what I saw or for what I had lost long before that night. That house had been my refuge, the last corner that still held Elizabeth. Now only ashes remained. Jack entered with 2 cups of coffee. "Cheers, dead man," he joked, raising his. I did not smile. I did not think it would hurt so much to pretend to die. "Only those who were truly alive feel that," he replied. The news spread like fire in dry grass. Within a few hours, social networks and local portals were talking about my passing. Old friends began to leave messages of condolence. Even some relatives I had not spoken to for years posted kind words. Death, I thought, has a strange power, that of reconciling those who did not have the courage to do so in life. But the part that really interested me had not happened yet. My son's reaction, and when I finally saw him in front of the cameras, I understood that everything I had planned was worth it. The television showed the facade of Daniel's house. He and Rachel were on the porch, surrounded by journalists. Daniel wore dark glasses, but his trembling voice sought to appear firm. "My father was a complicated man, but he will always be my father. We will miss him." He said it without blinking, with an exact pause, as if he were reading a script. Beside him, Rachel pretended to wipe a tear. The reporter asked her, "How do you feel, ma'am, after this tragedy?" She sighed and answered with a broken voice, "We just want to close this chapter and continue with what you would have wanted. Peace for the family." Peace, a word that in her mouth sounded like poison. That night, Jack and I sat in front of the TV with a bottle of wine. And now, What is next? He asked me. Wait for what? For them to make their first mistake. And they did not take long. 2 days later, the lawyer, Richard Stone, appeared on the local news, accompanied by Daniel. They announced the reading of the will and the pending transfer of assets. I could not help but let out a bitter laugh. They had not even waited for the mourning period. Barely had they buried the ashes of the stranger they thought was me, and they were already claiming theirs. Jack smiled ironically. Greed has a better sense of smell than a bloodhound. I dedicated myself to observing every movement from a distance. The cabin where I hid had an old radio, a small television, and an internet connection thanks to a generator. Jack installed discreet cameras at the entrance of my old house, what was left of it, and in front of Stone's office. Every day we reviewed the recordings. It was like watching a play where the villains forget the audience follows them. In one of those recordings, I saw Rachel meeting with the lawyer. Their voices were clear. "Now everything is ours," she said with a smile that froze my blood. "Almost everything," he replied. "We still need to release the offshore accounts." "Relax," she added. "Daniel suspects nothing." I felt a dry blow to the chest. Not only had they betrayed me, she was also betraying him. Jack looked at me, noticing my expression. "I told you, old man, in betrayals there are always hierarchies." 3 weeks passed. The country had already forgotten my death. Daniel showed himself in public as the new head of my properties, talking about continuing my legacy. His words disgusted me. But what hurt me the most was seeing that my granddaughter Sophie barely appeared. I knew they kept her away from everything, and that reassured me. She was not to blame for anything. One night, while reviewing my notes, Jack came in with a discreet smile. "The moment has arrived." "What are you talking about?" "Your son made his move. He sold the last property in your company's name. Everything is recorded." "Perfect," I said, feeling a rush of adrenaline run through me. "So, do we start?" I nodded. "Yes, it is time for the dead man to speak." The next morning, we sent 3 envelopes from a different post office with no return address. One for the prosecutor's office, another for a journalist, and the last one for Daniel. In each one, copies of the forged documents, the recordings of Rachel and the lawyer, and a message written in my own handwriting. Not every death is the end. Some are the beginning of the truth. When I sealed the envelope, I felt that something inside me also closed. The fear, the humiliation, the helplessness, everything was left behind. I looked at myself in the mirror of the small bathroom in the cabin. The face I saw was no longer that of a defeated man. It was that of a father willing to reclaim his name, even if for that he had to remain dead to the world. But before continuing, tell me here in the comments what you think of this story so far, and what you would do in my place. The silence when one is alive but the world believes otherwise sounds different. It is not peace. It is a hollow echo, as if the universe breathes without you. Sometimes I caught myself talking alone or answering aloud to the news anchors. Jack laughed and said death was turning me into a philosopher, but deep down what it was turning me into was human again. I had been hiding in the cabin for a month when the first consequences of my envelopes arrived. The press exploded. Headlines on all portals. New doubts about the death of businessman Robert Miller. Documents leaked involving his son in financial maneuvers, a fake widow and a lawyer in the crosshairs. Seeing their faces on television surrounded by microphones trying to defend the indefensible provoked in me a mixture of bitter laughter and compassion. Daniel looked pale with deep dark circles. Rachel, on the other hand, maintained the poise of someone who knows no shame. While reporters cornered them with questions, he stuttered. She lied with a serenity that only habit gives. My father-in-law signed those documents while alive. The accusations are cruel. But the evidence spoke louder than any speech, and while they sank, I remained silent, observing from the exile I myself had created. However, everything was satisfaction. The night weighed on me. Sleeping in a strange bed, with the wind hitting the windows and the clock marking meaningless hours, made me think too much. At what moment do a father and a son lose each other like this? When does it stop being love and become calculation? I remembered Daniel as a child running through the halls of the old house. I had taught him to ride a bike, to write his name, never to lie. And now he had signed my death sentence, not out of hate, but out of ambition. That was the deepest wound, knowing that his betrayal was not born of contempt, but of desire. One night, while reviewing reports Jack got from his contacts, I found a piece of information that froze my blood. My granddaughter Sophie was hospitalized. She had suffered a nervous breakdown at school. No one told the press, but the medical report confirmed it. "It cannot be," I murmured. Jack looked up from the desk. "What is wrong?" I showed him the document. He read it in silence. "The girl does not understand what is happening," he said with regret. "Losing her grandfather, seeing her parents on television. Too much for a child." I clenched my fists. "I know, old man, but if you appear now, you ruin everything." "I do not care." "Yes, you do care," he replied calmly. "If you do it prematurely, the real culprits will go unpunished, and your granddaughter will grow up believing her grandfather was a madman who abandoned everyone. Is that what you want?" I stayed silent. Sometimes Jack had a cruelty that hurt, but his words were true. I had to resist. For her, for Elizabeth, for me. 2 weeks later, Justice opened a formal investigation. The lawyer Stone was summoned to testify, and little by little, the media began to talk about a possible family scam. Daniel sank deeper every day. Friends avoided him, partners abandoned him, and Rachel simply disappeared, until one night I received an email. No sender, no subject, only one sentence. "I know you are alive." My heart skipped a beat. I called Jack immediately. "Does anyone know?" "Relax," he replied. "What exactly does it say?" I read him the message. He kept silent for a moment. "It must be Martha." "Why do you say that?" "Because no one else could know. And if it were your son, he would not write. He would go look for you." The relief lasted little. The next day, a second message arrived, this time with an address attached. The hospital where Sophie was, and only one word: "Come." I could not stay still. Jack warned me not to go, but there are things no father or grandfather can ignore. So, at nightfall, I put on a cap, dark glasses, and drove to the hospital. I parked far away, crossed the garden, and entered through the side door. No one recognized me. I went up to the second floor, room 214. I stopped before the door. From inside, a soft murmur could be heard. I pushed the slit barely open and saw her, Martha, sitting by Sophie's bed, reading her a story. The girl slept with her head bandaged and her breathing calm. Martha saw me. She got up immediately and ran toward me, her eyes filled with tears. "I knew you would come," she whispered. "What happened to her?" "She fainted at school. She would not stop screaming your name." I swallowed hard. "And Daniel, he has not come once. He is running from the journalists and his wife. No one knows where she is." I approached the bed. Sophie, barely 9 years old, breathed with the innocence that adults lose. I stroked her forehead carefully. "Forgive me, little one," I whispered. "This will all end soon." Martha looked at me with tenderness. "You have to come back, sir. Someone has to tell the truth." "Not yet. Something is missing." The final blow. When I returned to the cabin, Jack was waiting for me awake. I told him everything. He sighed. "I knew you would go. I could not stay away." "I know. But remember, silence is your best weapon." I nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I understood the true meaning of his phrase, because silence not only protects, it also punishes, and those who one day believed they could speak in my name would soon learn what it feels like when the dead man speaks again. No one dies completely as long as they remember who they were. But sometimes to survive you have to stop being yourself. And that was exactly what I did. Jack helped me get a new identity. Manuel Rivas, 62 years old, retired maintenance technician, a name without a past, without family, without history. The type of man no one looks at twice, who goes unnoticed in the crowd, perfect for what I needed. It had been more than a month since my fake death. The police were still investigating the case, but the media had already moved on to another scandal. Or at least that is what I thought, until one morning while reading the newspaper in the cabin, a piece of news left me frozen. Rachel Ramirez, widow of businessman Robert Miller, reappears as the new investor of Miller Holdings, property of her late father. Miller Holdings, my company, the one I founded with Elizabeth 30 years ago. And there she was, smiling in a photograph, dressed in black and with a mourning armband. Rich widow, owner of something that never belonged to her. The fire, I thought, extinguished inside me lit up again. It was no longer enough to watch. I had to see her up close, and for that I needed to get close to the only place where my name was still breathed. The offices of Miller Holdings. Jack, although he did not agree, helped me get a temporary position as a maintenance assistant in the building. No one would suspect an old man fixing sockets and changing light bulbs. When he saw me in the uniform, he could not help laughing. From businessman to electrician. If Elizabeth saw you, she would laugh with you, or she would slap me for not doing it. Sooner, I replied. The following week, I was already there. The building which I myself had ordered built received me with an alien, almost hostile air. Nothing remained of the warmth we used to have with the employees. Now everything was glass, metal, and surveillance. The corridors looked like cold hospital tunnels. I spent my first day changing light bulbs on the 3rd floor. No one recognized me. Years had passed, and the beard, the gray hair, and the thick glasses did the rest. I was invisible, and that invisibility gave me power. The second day I saw her, Rachel. She got off the elevator surrounded by 2 men in suits. She was laughing. Her perfume, the same one she used to wear for family gatherings, filled the hallway. When she passed by me, she looked at me without seeing me, and that indifference was the most ironic blow of all. I had died so well that even my murderer ignored me. During the following weeks, I began to observe her every step, every visit to the office, every meeting with partners. I took notes in a notebook I kept in the toolbox. Jack came every night to collect the information. One afternoon, while cleaning the hallway windows, I heard something that made me hold my breath. Rachel was talking on the phone from her office. The door was ajar. "Yes, Richard, the money is almost ready, but I need Daniel to sign the last document." "No, he knows nothing. I will just tell him it is an insurance update." I leaned on the broom. I heard her laugh softly. "With this, everything will be mine. And when the old man appears, if he appears, he will not have a cent to claim." My fist clenched so hard I felt my bones crack. I had to stay calm. My moment would come, but it was not the day yet. Every word she said was one more piece of the puzzle, and I was going to complete it with patience. One night, as I was leaving the building, I heard my real name for the first time in months. "Robert." I turned sharply. "Martha, the employee." She wore simple clothes, but her eyes remained the same, brave and sad. "My God," she whispered. "I thought you were a ghost." "And in a way, I am," I replied. "We took refuge in the side alley." She hugged me. "I knew you had not died. I could not believe God would take a man like you that way. I am alive, Martha, but I need you to keep pretending." "What are you going to do now?" "Finish what they started." I told her about my infiltration without many details. She nodded with determination. "Count on me. I still have contacts inside the house, and if the lady returns, I will know." "Thank you, child." I took her hand. "When this is over, I want you to be the one to tell the story." "No, sir, it will be you." Days turned into weeks. Daniel reappeared at the company, or rather was dragged by Rachel. I saw him arrive one morning, haggarded with a wrinkled suit and a lost look. He looked like a man who had already lost everything. She led him by the arm, controlling every step. From my post a few yards away, I watched them. "Just sign, Daniel," she said, handing him a folder. "What is this?" he asked, confused. "A document to ensure the continuity of the company. It is for your own good." Daniel signed. I, from the reflection of the glass, captured a photo with my cell phone. That image, that signature, was the last piece I needed. Jack could prove with it that the fraud was still active even after my death. That night, when I returned to the cabin, he welcomed me with his old fox smile. "You have everything, Robert. Almost everything. What is missing?" Seeing them fall with my own eyes. Jack poured a drink and raised the glass. Then, "Old friend, welcome to the point of no return." We toasted in silence. The fire crackled in the fireplace, and I understood something. I was no longer Robert Miller. I was the man without a name, the ghost they themselves created. And what I was about to do was not revenge, it was justice. Every hunt begins with a silence, a wait, a held breath. But now I was the hunter, and the first rule of a good hunter is to let the prey approach on its own. Jack helped me prepare every detail. The plan had to be as meticulous as theirs, but with a difference. Mine did not seek to destroy innocent lives, but to reveal hidden truths. Justice is not always found in courts. Sometimes you have to build it with your own hands. The first step was sowing doubt. Using an anonymous account, we sent Rachel and Daniel an identical email. I know what you did to Robert Miller. Not everything remained buried. If you want to keep your version intact, prepare to pay. We accompanied the message with a photo, the one of the fake signature Daniel had placed days before. We knew that would be enough to unleash panic. That same afternoon, from my post in the building, I observed how both arrived separately, upset, looking everywhere. She went directly up to Richard Stone's office. He, on the other hand, locked himself in his office and did not come out until 3 hours later. When he finally did, he had a lost look, a white face. It was the face of a man beginning to understand that the dead can also speak. During the following days, the emails repeated, each with a different tone, more direct, more threatening. Jack drafted the text with surgical precision, while I reviewed them word by word. The goal was not to extort them, but to accelerate their moral downfall. Let fear force them to expose themselves. And it worked. Daniel started making mistakes. He sold stocks hastily, transferred money to accounts that were already monitored. And Rachel, feeling control slipping away, tried to contact Richard to get out what was left. She did not know that Richard himself was already being investigated, thanks to the documents we sent to the prosecutor's office weeks before. The circle was closing. One morning while cleaning the windows on the 10th floor, I heard the scream. It was Daniel. The door to his office swung open, and I saw him throw a folder on the floor. It cannot be. This cannot be happening. Rachel entered behind him, finding calm. Relax, love. We will solve it. Solve, he said, out of his mind. They are cornering us. Does anyone know about Dad? She closed the door and lowered her voice. Shut up. If anyone hears you, we are lost. I stood still, pretending to concentrate on my work, but every word came through clearly. You said everything was controlled, Daniel growled. And it was until you decided to trust Richard. Do not blame me. It was you who the rest of the sentence was lost in a slam. But I did not need to hear more. They were already destroying each other. My job simply was to let fear do the rest. That same night at the cabin, Jack showed me a folder full of documents. This is enough to sink them legally, he said. They were copies of transactions, intercepted emails, sworn statements. Every piece fit perfectly. Only a final blow was missing. Public exposure. Are you going to do it? He asked me. Yes. Then, old friend, it will be your resurrection. The opportunity came 2 days later. The Miller Group organized a press conference to clarify rumors. Rachel and Daniel would appear together in front of the cameras, proclaiming their innocence. There could be no better stage. That morning, I dressed in the maintenance uniform and carried my toolbox. No one suspected the old manager checking the cables in the auditorium. I discreetly placed a USB drive connected to the projection system. In it, the documents, the recordings, the images, and my voice. At 11, the event began. The room was full of journalists. Rachel, impeccable, took the microphone. We want to thank you for your presence and deny the baseless accusations that have been spread. Daniel remained behind her, visibly tense. His hands were sweating. His eyes avoided looking at the audience. The moderator announced a brief audio-visual presentation with the history of the Miller family, and then the screen turned on. First, a photo of me in black and white. Then the sound of my voice gravely paused like an echo coming from the other side. Good afternoon. If you are watching this, it is because the truth decided to speak. Not all deaths are accidents. Some are planned silences. Murmurs filled the room. Daniel stepped back. Documents, transfers, fake signatures, recordings with her voice, and the lawyers began to appear on the screen. Every line was a stab. The journalists stood up, pointing their microphones and cameras. Rachel tried to smile. That is a montage, she shouted. But the voice in the recording interrupted her. With this, everything will be mine. And when the old man appears, he will not have a cent. The room erupted. Daniel, trembling, tried to turn off the projector, but the presentation continued. Last slide. My recent photo taken from the cabin looking at the horizon and a final text. Robert Miller is still alive. The chaos was immediate. The press surrounded the couple. Security guards tried to cut the transmission, but it was too late. Jack had done his part. The signal was being rebroadcast live on the internet. In a matter of minutes, the whole country knew the dead man had returned. I, from a dark corner of the auditorium, slowly took off my cap. For an instant, Daniel looked up, and our eyes met. His face went pale. He did not scream. He did not run. He said nothing. He just understood. And in that silence, I knew my revenge was over. That night, I returned to the cabin. Jack was waiting for me, with a whiskey poured. "Well," he asked, "the trap closed. And how do you feel?" "Tired." "That is justice, old man. It never comes free." I stared at the fire. I felt no joy or triumph or relief, only a deep exhaustion, as if every year of my life had returned at once. But inside that exhaustion, there was something new, peace, because sometimes silence is not the end. It is the most perfect way to scream. The city was silent that night, or at least it seemed so to me, from the cabin window, while the wind moved the branches of the eucalyptus guarding the porch. On the news, they spoke of me as if I were a myth. Robert Miller is still alive, according to anonymous sources. I listened to their voices and smiled with sadness. Yes, I was alive, but I was no longer the same. The man my son knew had died the day I saw him sign my sentence. Jack watched me from the armchair. "Sooner or later you will have to face him," he said, without taking his eyes off the fire. "I know. And what will you do when you have him in front of you? It will depend on what I see in his eyes. And if you do not see regret, then I will see for the last time the boy I lost." I did not have to look for him. He came to me. 2 days after the conference, Daniel appeared at the cabin. I do not know how he found me. Maybe the same instinct that once united us guided him. It was 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I was chopping wood when I heard the crunch of gravel under the wheels of a car. I turned around. He got out slowly, without haste, without pride, without a mask. He wore an old jacket, his face haggarded, his eyes sunken. For a moment, time went back 20 years. I saw the boy who one day asked me for help for his first job. But that memory vanished when he said, "Dad." The word went through me like a knife. It had been so long since I heard it. I left the axe aside. "I did not know if you would come," I told him. "Me neither." He approached slowly with empty hands. We stood face to face. The silence between us weighed more than everything that had happened. "So, you are alive," he said at last. "More than ever. Why did you do all this to see how far your silence would go?" His lips trembled. "You do not know what it was like, Dad." "Rachel, do not say her name," I interrupted him. "Do not dare hide behind her." "It was not that easy," he insisted, lowering his gaze. "I just wanted to solve the debts. Start over. She convinced me that you would understand, that it would not hurt you, and signing my death was part of that understanding." Daniel shuddered. "I thought they were just papers. Papers always tell the truth. The problem is, who signs them?" He put his hands to his head. "You do not know what it is to live with this guilt." "Of course I know," I said in a low voice. "Guilt was the only thing left for me when your mother died." He looked me in the eyes for the first time, and I saw it. The remorse, the fear, and something else. We sat on the porch. The wind brought the smell of wet earth. Daniel spoke for a long time. He told me about the pressures, the debts, Rachel's manipulation, the fear of losing everything. I listened in silence. I did not interrupt him once. When he finished, I remained quiet. "And does all that justify trying to erase your own father?" "No," he whispered. "But it was what I did." I nodded slowly. "You know, Daniel, when you were a child, your mother told me you had a gift, that of convincing with a look, and you used it well. You convinced me that there was still goodness in you." "Dad, do not speak. Let me finish." I took a breath. "I did not plan this to humiliate you. I did it because I needed to see if the son I raised was still inside you, if that child could still feel shame." He covered his face with his hands. Tears began to fall. "I feel it every day. Since I saw that conference, since I heard your voice in those recordings, I have not slept. I have not eaten. I have not had peace." I kept silent. For the first time, I did not see the traitor. I saw the broken man my mistakes had helped form. "And now what will you do?" he asked me, looking up. "Nothing," I said. "Nothing. You already destroyed them by yourself. Justice will take care of the rest. And you?" "I already got what I needed." He stood up slowly. "I do not know how to live with this." "Learn," I replied, "or die for real. But if you decide to live, do it well. Not for me, for Sophie." Her name made him tremble. "How do you know about her?" "Because I am still her grandfather, even if you forgot." Daniel broke into tears. "I took her to a psychologist. She does not stop dreaming about you. She says you call her from a fire." "Maybe I do," I murmured. "Maybe I try to wake her up before it is too late." He looked at me with despair. "Are you going to forgive me?" "That does not depend on me." then on whom, on time, and on the man you decide to be tomorrow. He stayed a while longer without speaking. When he left, the sky was already dark. The noise of the car driving away mixed with the song of the crickets. I felt my soul tired, but also light. For the first time in years, there was no rage, only emptiness. Jack came out to the porch with 2 glasses in a bottle. "Well, there is no more hate," I told him. "And is that good? I do not know, but it is sufficient." We stood looking at the stars, and I understood that the justice I had sought was not that of the courts, but that of the looks, the one that neither absolves nor condemns, only reveals. The next day, I received a message on my cell phone. It was from Daniel. Only 3 words. "Thanks for seeing me." I replied with another 3. "Do it for her." I turned off the phone and went out to the garden. The morning sun fell on the damp wood of the porch. For the first time in a long time, I breathed without fear, because I understood that some wars are not won when the enemy falls, but when one stops hating him. Winter arrived earlier that year. The leaves of the poplars fell ahead of time, and the air had that scent announcing that something is ending. Sometimes I think nature knows more than we do. It understands endings without fear, without noise, without explanations. I, on the other hand, needed to close mine with words. A month had passed since Daniel's visit. I did not hear from him again, but his silence no longer hurt me. For the first time in a long time, I understood that silence is not always contempt. Sometimes it is redemption, and that was enough. Jack had gone for a few days to visit his son, so the cabin was calm. The fire sparked in the fireplace, and I had on the table what would be my last task. Dear Sophie, when you read these lines, perhaps I will no longer be in this world. Or perhaps, yes, observing you from afar, like grandparents who live in the wind. I want to tell you something that is not in the books. The truth is not always pretty, but it always liberates. Your father and I made mistakes. He out of ambition, I out of pride. 2 different ways to lose love. If life ever forces you to choose between being right or having peace, choose peace. I loved you from the day I held you for the first time in my arms. You had your grandmother Elizabeth's eyes, that mixture of tenderness and fire that transforms everything. Sometimes being good is the bravest act of all. Remember this always. Justice may delay, but it arrives even when the judges are tears. I stopped, the ink mixed with a drop from my eyes. It was not sadness, it was relief. I had lived enough to see the darkness, and even so find light. I put the letter in an envelope, sealed it, and left it in the desk drawer next to Elizabeth's photo. Her smile, eternal and serene, accompanied me even now. "I am done, old girl," I murmured. "You can stop worrying about me now." The following days passed quietly. The news spoke of arrests, of judicial processes, of a dismantled corruption network. Rachel and Richard Stone had been detained. Daniel, as I learned, had collaborated with justice and received a lesser sentence. In a way, the truth had saved him, and I simply stepped aside. I did not need more noise. I spent the afternoons on the porch with a blanket over my legs, watching the sun hide behind the mountains. Sometimes I thought I heard Sophie's laughter among the trees, or maybe it was the wind playing with my memory. One afternoon, while the sky turned orange, a car stopped in front of the cabin. I recognized the silhouette even before seeing it. Well, it was Martha. She carried an envelope in her hand. "Good afternoon, Mr. Robert," she said, smiling with that mixture of respect and affection she always had. "Good afternoon, child. What brings you here?" This, she handed me the envelope. A girl with a braid and a notebook full of drawings gave it to me. She said it was from her favorite grandfather. I took it without words. Inside was a letter written in childish handwriting. "Grandpa, Mom says you were traveling. I dreamed of you last night. You told me that winter is not scary, that you just have to have a blanket and a pretty story. When you come, I want you to tell it to me. I love you to the sky, Sophie." I read it 1, 2, 3 times, and I understood that the story already had its closure. Not that of the courts, not that of revenge, but the one that truly matters. Forgiveness. That last page in my notebook. Not for anyone else, just for me. I faked my death to discover the truth. But what I found was my life. Love is not measured by blood, but by conscience. They become lessons that time teaches their grandchildren. I closed the notebook. The fire crackled, and every spark that went up reminded me that there is no sad ending when one learns to let go. Jack returned that same night. "Bring wine and fresh bread." "Well, old ghost," he joked, "what will you write now that the tale is over?" "Nothing," I told him. "There is no story left to tell, only memories to care for." We toasted in silence. Outside, it began to snow. It was the first snowfall of the year. The treetops were covered in white, and the cabin finally felt like a home. That early morning, I dreamed of Elizabeth. She came walking through the garden with her blue dress and the smile of always. She stopped in front of me and told me, "See, love, all you had to do was forgive." And when I hugged her, I understood that winter is not the end of anything, only a form of rest. When dawn broke, Martha found the cabin silent. The fire still burned, the cup of coffee was still hot, and on the desk 2 envelopes, one with the letter for Sophie, another with a note that said, "If anyone ever hears my story, do not call it a tragedy. It was just the journey of a man who learned too late to say goodbye." And if you, who are listening now to my voice, reached this far, I want to thank you for accompanying me on this journey. If this story moved, you subscribe to the channel. Leave me your like and tell me in the comments what you thought. Tell me also from what city you watch us. And if you ever learned, like me, that sometimes living in peace is the best revenge. I am Robert Miller, and this was my story.